Hello everyone, and welcome to the TRIRIGA Perceptive Space Applications TTEC Go session. My name is Alfredo Cortez. I'm a design architect with the IBM IoT Business Architecture and Design team. And in this session, presenting with me, we have Nityan Govindaswamy, Ankap Ninkesat, and Armelin Madsen from our application development team. Thanks for sharing some of your time with us today. What we will be covering today, I will be executing an overview and a demo of the perceptive applications we're introducing in this release. As you can see there on the screen, we'll be focusing on space assessment and space management. We'll talk about the objectives from a functional point of view, as well as the user experience that we are introducing within the TRIRIGA portfolio. Following that series of demos, there will be a description on kind of a deep dive on the technical review driven by Ankap and Nityan, where you guys will get a grasp of the new TRIRIGA metadata object, the review routing processes, as well as the licensing and security considerations for the applications in this release. And finally, Ankap will close with some insights on what is associated with application customization. So she will be running some use cases where she will add and remove fields, focus on the workflow interaction with these applications. So she will go in there and modify workflows that are tied to one of the actions that we'll demo through the Perceptive app highlights. And finally, she'll provide some debugging tips. If you get a hold of this presentation, you will see at the last slide there will be a number of links for reference materials where you get additional information on the aspects and topics that we'll cover in the following 90 minutes. Okay, to start, I have the field level, as they say. Let's talk about a little bit what is new on what is bringing into the table within the TRIRIGA perceptive applications. So basically, we're going to be talking about the next generation of TRIRIGA applications. These applications are focusing on providing an intuitive user-centered experience. We're trying to make things streamlined, that the level of interaction that our users will have with the applications and its function features are really simple and intuitive. And one of the keys of this streamlined interaction is its responsive web design. So we're going to have a level of interaction across different devices that will be basically uniform, no matter which device you're using. So big effort on this web design driven application responsiveness. We are building now the latest web technologies, so you will see that now these perceptive applications are running on top of HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, an element of web components. We are using custom, reusable, and extensive elements, basically making their development, maintenance, and customization way more simpler. The perceptive applications for space that we're going to run through have been designed specifically for tablet devices. So we want to take advantage of the mobility they imply for our users, as well as the level of interaction they provide with some of the informational aspects of the application. As you will see through the demo, the target screen resolution is tablet, mainly because of the number of elements we need to render on the screen, and these are applications that rely heavily on floor plan diagrams. So that's an optimal, the tablet is an optimal size for this level of interaction. Basically, these perceptive applications will provide real-time access to TRIRIGA space allocation information. So while you are connected to the server, you will be able to interact and render information that resides in TRIRIGA instantaneously. we continue with slide number 4. So the first perceptive application that I'm going to be demoing today is space assessment. This is an application that's aimed to help our space managers. Basically, it's the role in the organization of the employees or persons which are responsible for maintaining space. And obviously, there's space allocation information in TRIRIGA. What is space allocation information? It's the level of association of other TRIRIGA records or elements, for example, people or assets. This association between these other elements and space is referred to as space allocation. So our space assessment application will allow our users to run inspection of the spaces for a building, one floor at a time. They will be able to compare the findings of this physical inspection against current space information in TRIRIGA database, and our users will be able to log remediation actions with the final objective of bringing TRIRIGA information up to date. Right? So in the event of seeing a mismatch from what the TRIRIGA database indicates to what our user running the physical inspection sees, they will be able to log these remediation actions. So let me switch here gears. I'm going to jump into the Perceptive application. Give me 1 second here. So you can see I'm displaying the login screen for the space assessment application using tablet emulator. So you see how the content and the information is rendered at this scale. As I mentioned before, perceptive applications have been designed with an element of effective interaction within different devices. So in the event of accessing space assessment through a workstation, for example, the information will be rendered effectively even at that level of a string resolution. So let me log in here. I'm playing the role of a space manager who wants to define space assessment and wants to execute it right on the spot. Right? Just bear with me here 1 second. Okay. So the first thing you get when you access the space assessment application is a kind of our main screen, our entry point, where you will see any existing space assessments that my user account, in this case, Alfredo Space, has ongoing or in progress. As you can see here, I don't have anything yet. I'll run another scenario where there's a space assessment assigned to me. So in the event of that happening, once I log in, I will not need to define or create any new assessment. It will be created for me, and it will be already assigned to me. So in this case, I'm going to initiate a brand new one. So the first thing that I need to determine is the specific location in which the assessment will take place. So for that, I have basically 2 elements that I need to provide. One is the building. In this case, I'm going to select Charlotte Center, and the floor in which our assessment will take place. In this case, I'm going to select the 2nd floor. You can see that once I select these 2 pieces of information, the application will render the floor diagram associated with the location. We are providing 2 different views for these types of information. One, it's the default view, floor plan. But in the event of having our users working more comfortable with the list, or having to execute an assessment on a floor that there is no floor plan defined, we're not limiting the application to work on with floor plan. The interaction will be done against the list of spaces. associated with that particular floor. Before I continue with that, I'm just going to provide a description here. So I'm going to name it TTEC 2015 Space Assessment, and going to define as the due date for the space assessment as December 11th. This is giving a level of control for our space manager or whoever is creating the assessment to give an idea on when he's expecting to have this assessment completed and ready for the final approval. As you can see, we are color coding the spaces on the floor plan with this particular shade of blue, and that indicates that by default all the spaces, all the available selectable spaces in the floor plan are pre-selected. So here I can start interacting according to the needs that I have for this particular assessment. For example, if I know that on this particular quarter, my company needs to have a partial assessment of the floor. It could be given area, maybe only half of the floor plan in this quarter, next half of the floor plan for the following quarter. It depends on how big and time demanding will be to have that assessment executed, or maybe I want to execute the assessment of spaces associated with particular organizations that are occupying the office space. So in this case, I'm just going to show the level of flexibility and interaction that the application will provide. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to deselect all the spaces. You can see there that now appear as not highlighted. I could go in, start interact with the floor plan and be cherry picking the spaces that I want to assess. So here I'm just selecting 4 spaces and basically indicating through the application that I'm going to define an assessment that will focus only on those 4 spaces. Or as I mentioned before, maybe I just want to go with a particular organization. So I know I have an organization here called Business Development. You can see that we have around 12 spaces here highlighted, that if I choose to select them all, you see them highlighted as selected. So I can start manipulating the selections that I'm doing directly on the floor plan. One thing that I want to show is if I switch to the list view, you will see only the spaces that I have selected listed. Before I had all the spaces in the floor plan selected. Here I only have the ones that have matched my business development query criteria. If I remove the query criteria and maybe search for another organization, let's say sales, you will see that other area in the floor plan highlights. I can do my selection. If I remove the search criteria, you will see that these are maintained, right? And I can keep going and select maybe another area. So you can see it gives us a good level of interactions. Another element that I'm just going to deselect all of them. And another way in which you can interact with the floor plan to do a selection of the spaces you want to assess is through identifying and marking which ones are you going to do that. So you can see we have 2 icons here, one representing the zoom in, zoom out functionality of our application. And you can go in here, zoom in, zoom out, and toggle. Maybe you want to identify more information that's conveyed through the actual floor plan diagram, or maybe you want to sorry, 1 second here. You want to do do a multi-selection. So for that, you go to a multi-select icon here, and now the level of interaction that I have with the floor plan allows me to flag or mark the spaces that I want to highlight. Right, so let's say I need to execute this particular quarter, half of this floor plan, an assessment for half of this floor plan. I can just go in here and start highlighting half of it without the need of running any searches or queries. Just go in there, select, and run the creation process. So for the purposes of saving some time during this demonstration, I'm just going to select a few of the spaces here, because I'm going to show you what happens when you initiate the space assessment. So we can see here I have selected 3 workstations up here and this big office on the corner. And I select the create button. Basically, the application right now is creating the space assessment record that will enable me to start running the assessment. So now I'm on assessment execution mode. Let me go back to my assessment. If you recall, when I log in, I didn't have any assessments ready. I had to create one, so now I have one. You can see that we have a very clear indication of the location in which the assessment is taking place, the due date that the assessment is supposed to be executed, as well as the progress. So right now, this is a brand new assessment. 0% of the execution has been completed. However, I will be in a position now to start working with it. So as I mentioned before, this mobile user experience that the application will provide is basically geared toward the actual assessment execution, right? So you can see our users walking down the floor plan, iPad on their left hand, and basically executing the assessment. So this is the process that they will follow. So they will tap directly on the screen on the space they're going to assess. You can see here that on the right side panel of the space assessment application, we render now space detail information. We are rendering the space name, what type of space it is, the occupancy, the capacity, and the space allocation information. We can see here that for this particular space, there are 0 people that are assigned to it, and there are no assets assigned to it. This particular space corresponds to one occupancy organization, one charge organization, right? So this is part of the real estate chargeback and occupancy organization. So there are basically 2 actions that the person executing the assessment will possibly take at this point in time. So he will basically execute the physical inspection of the space. Let's say he determines that there is someone sitting there, and he has to request this person to be added. So here he will just tap the plus. This implies that there will be an add action. He will look for the person that he's sitting there. Maybe he just wants to ask the question. Okay, name. He asks his name. Okay, who are you? Well, I'm Steve Johnson. Okay. Okay, so then he starts looking for some of the Johnson person here. Let's say it's Jack Johnson. Once he selects it, we'll see that a number of things have changed on our UI, and there's some indication there has been progress on here. First one, we have our progress bar here moved to 25%. Remember, we had 4 spaces that are supposed to be assessed. We have a counter out here, so we have assessed 1 out of 4. If you notice, there was a visual cue here next to the space that identified the space as gray, meaning that it was not assessed yet. You have not done at that point in time a determination. Now it has changed to red. Basically, it's a visual cue, visual indicator that there has been an action collected with the objective of remediate a mismatch of what you saw physically on the space and what the TRIRIGA database is indicating. In this case, in this example, Jack Johnson is sitting on that space. He mentioned that he just, for example, been relocated, but for some reason the TRIRIGA database does not reflect that situation. So right now I have collected one action that is part of the space assessment. Let's say that Jack Johnson as well brought some assets or some piece of equipment, and they will stay within that space. And right now, TRIRIGA database does not reference any of that document in its records. So, for example, let's say that there is a multimedia project that will stay on the space. Well, you need to add it as well. So here now we have captured two actions to remediate what you're seeing physically, right? So you're gonna add a person and you're gonna add an asset to this space, right? And at this point in time, the TRIRIGA database does not reflect that. You have the option here if you need to backtrack some of these actions. Let's say, oh, you know what, I selected the wrong project, or about just do an undo selection there. So you're back where you started, no assets assigned. If you have done a number of actions and you basically want to start from scratch, you don't want to go one by one, basically save, sometimes you can discard all the changes. Basically, you will get prompt if you want to really drop all the changes and go to an initial state of the space when you initiated the assessment. So you can see here again the space went back to where it started, right? It's a status of selected set here. Let me do a little bit of a zoom here. You can see here that we are selecting the space. The space flagged as gray because no action or assessment action has been applied to it. And you're basically on step 0. Right? In the event of not identifying any mismatch with between the database, between the TRIRIGA database and and the physical inspection, it's very simple. The action that our user will need to take, basically, you just need to select verify. We highlight the space as assessed, our progress of our moves, and the space is identified as green, right? Everything went okay. Whatever the space allocation information in TRIRIGA says is matching what I'm seeing physically on the floor plan. And that's basically a recursive process. So I'm done with space number 1. I continue walking the office space with my tablet on hand and tapping on the next space I'm gonna verify. Sorry. In this case, let's say I see that in space 02BR22 building, he is not supposed to be there. He's just transitioned a month ago, and for some reason someone forgot to update the space allocation information. So very straightforward. You need to remove him from that space. You just click the minus, maybe provide some additional information here. Building, transition to a new location. Just that information will be helpful for the space manager at the point of verifying the actions that will be applied to the database. As I mentioned before, while an assessment is executed, all these actions, the add or the remove of persons or people or assets, are just collected. And eventually, once the assessment is completed, there will be a point in the execution flow where these actions will be applied. Again, like we saw on the previous space, we have a visual indication of progress. Now we're 50% completion. We have assessed 2 out of 4 spaces, and our space is highlighted in red, basically indicating that there has been some remediation actions collected or queuing for their eventual application into space allocation information. Let me just show you what's going on here in the list view. Remember, we can flip between views if we do not have a floor plan, as you with a particular floor, which we need to run the assessment. We can verify everything via the list. So you can see here, maybe we have a user that's more comfortable with this view, is more compact, if you will. So you can see really, really well that you have 4 spaces and you need to assess. One was a successfully verified, meaning there was no mismatch between physical findings and TRIRIGA space allocations. The other one does have some actions. If you select the different records, the right panel here will render detailed information about that space and an indication of the actions you have selected to be applied. So in this case, we can see building has been flagged as being proposed as being removed from that space. And we have 2 spaces here that have not been completed. So I'm just going to go ahead and verify both of them. You switch back to the floor plan. You can see here that we are fully synchronized between views. It's just 2 different ways of rendering basically the same information. And finally here, I'm just going to verify that that's successful. Another view that you have here is a way in which you can render the details of the assessment. Here, you can go back and revisit what types of actions you have done, right? So in this case, on our workstation 02BR22, we are proposing to have building removed from the space allocation information, given that he transitioned to a new location, right? This is kind of just for your information purposes. Notice that the complete button now has enabled, meaning that you have reached 100% of the spaces to be assessed. So in more realistic assessment situations, you will be assessing on a few dozen of offices or workstations. So the progress will run slower. However, the complete button will be maintained disabled until you reach that 100%. What's the indication of this complete? Basically, once you select it, the actions that you have captured will be basically fixed, and the second step on the space assessment execution will kick in, and that's a piece that the space management application takes care of. So I will run through that as the next demo. So let me just complete the assessment. You will see here that we have a prompt indicating that any changes, you won't be able to execute any changes to the assessment actions you have collected if you want to proceed. So the space assessment has been completed, and it will be now on the space management end for its approval application of the actions that were collected. So let me continue now with the other Perceptive application, space management, and the role that this application has on the space assessment process, right? So space management is a Perceptive application that's aimed to help space managers manage and review completed space assessments. This is prior to have the TRIRIGA space allocation changes applied, right? So as I show you in the previous demo, I create the assessment, run the assessment, complete the assessment, and now and I'm going to show you this. the space allocation in the TRIRIGA database at this point in time have not been impacted yet. It's when the space management application comes into the picture where this will take place. So space management is allowing our users to create and assign space assessment. That's all the element. Let's say you have a situation where you are the space manager and you have a remote locations where you need to run assessments, and obviously it's highly unlikely that you will be able to travel to all these remote locations and execute the assessments yourself. So you will be in need of assigning those assessments to particular people that are in these locations. However, we understand the space managers want to have full control of defining the assessment, determine the location, the floor, and the spaces that will be targeted for the assessment, and just being capable of assigning it to someone that his only responsibility is to run the assessment, right? These persons don't need to worry about, okay, which spaces I'm supposed to be selecting as part of the assessment. They'll just grab the assessment that has been assigned to them and run it as I showed you in the previous demo, sorry. So our users will be able as well as reviewing the completed space assessments, and this is before any remediation actions is applied to the TRIRIGA space allocation. So at that point, our space manager, through space management application, will be able to exclude some actions. Maybe he has additional information about the possible actions that the space assessment has indicated that make these actions invalid. For example, these might come handy when you're adding a person to a space. Maybe this person has been temporarily working from that particular location, and it happened that the day that the assessment was run, he was sitting on that office, and whoever run the assessment thinks that this person should be assigned to that space. However, space manager knows that space will remain with no person until maybe a new area moves into the floor. So even though that he has received a space assessment with an action of add, he could potentially decide not to execute the action. So let me switch back to my browser here. My logout from space assessment, and I want to show you first I'm gonna log into TRIRIGA, and I want to show you the space allocation information of that space that, if you remember on my first part of the demo, we talked about removing building from the space. I want to show you that building still there. So I'm going to go to portfolio, location, spaces. And if I remember correctly, the space was 02 BR22. Let me open this record. And if we looked under the details tab, that's where we'll find this information. So you can see here, listed as the primary location for this group of people. We can see here we have this employee building, right? So this is the information for space allocation for space 02BR22 in the system of record, right, in TRIRIGA. So this highlights the fact that through the space assessment execution, no actions are taken until they are applied. And who executes the application of these actions is space manager via the space management perceptive application. So let me go there. So this is my space management application. Logging in again. Oops, sorry. Wrong password. bear with me 1 second here. Let's jump into my assessment. So a few things going on here on this landing page, if you will, on space management. You can see here we have 3 different tabs, each one providing us with different levels of space assessment information. So the first one, we have a visual indication here that we have 3 assessments in progress. So these come handy when normally space assessments are recurrent processes that organizations run with certain frequency, right? So it's highly probable that you have a number of them executing at any point in time. So space manager, you will be interested in seeing how they are progressing. We are highlighting the due date of them. So if you see that there is not much progress and we're getting very close to the due date for that particular space assessment, well, space manager could start looking for some answers on why the assessment is not progressing as expected. Now, you can see here, very noticeable under my pending for review tab is that I have one assessment that's waiting for my attention. Obviously, these counters will indicate in the event of having more, any number of assessment pending for my attention. So I select the tab, and you can see here that the assessment I just completed a few minutes back on the first, as part of the first part of my demo, it's here now in space management. It is telling me here my summary information on space management, that the TTEC 2015 space assessment was completed and is pending for review. It was assessed by Alfredo Space account. It was assessed on December the 4th, 2015, and 4 spaces were assessed. Right? So I can go in here and start looking at the information within the assessment and the possible actions that I can take. Again, we have our tabs that lets us interact with the assessment information. In this case, because we are in space management, we are dealing with the actions that were collected through this execution of the assessment. So we have 3 different views: space-based view, people, and assets, depending on what's more intuitive for our space managers. We'll just give them 3 options. The first one is space-based. So in my example, I only identify a mismatch in one space. Remember this 02BR22 space. And you can see here within this space, I only had one action, the removal of the person of this building, and here are my comments, right? So as a space manager, I can verify here any observations by means of these assessment comments that the assessor wants me to convey to myself, right? So in this case, he's telling me that building has transitioned to a new location. Yeah, I'm aware of that. So I will be able to decide if I want to go ahead and apply the remove person action or possibly exclude this action. The other views, I have these people-based views, so any people action being remove person or add person will be listed here. So you can see here this table view, could potentially see a number of different spaces here. In the space view, everything is grouped by space. Here is everything is expanded by any person-related action. I didn't collect any asset-related action, so you won't see anything here. You can see on my last tab there hasn't been any exclusions on this particular assessment. So just for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to select for now to exclude. Let's say that I understand that building transition is just temporary. He'll be back. Maybe he's on a 6-month sabbatical or taking a special training, but he will be back. He needs his workstation, so I'm not going to go through the update process of the TRIRIGA space allocations. So I can just decide to exclude. Maybe give a reason for this exclusion. So you can see that the actions has disappeared from my people view. If I go on the spaces, I don't see any action as well. However, I now see that I have a counter of 1 on the exclusion tab. And I can see here that I have excluded the removal of a person, right? It's building. If I have more exclusions for other types of actions, all of them will be listed here. So in the event of double checking what I have selected not to be applied, I can go here and possibly backtrack my decisions, right? So I say, oh, you know what, he is supposed to stay in this new location, so I need to reclaim that space allocation. So I'm just going to go and do the undo. You will see here that under the people actions tab, I can see it again, right? My spaces list this remove person action. So once I finalized verifying all the actions that were collected for this particular assessment, I can go here and select apply. Just get confirmation that the actions list included in this assessment will be applied to the system of record. I can go ahead and say yes. My counters are updated. My record has been removed from the pending view tab because I have basically completed the actions that I was expected to. And if I go into the completed tab, I will see it listed there. Right? This is just kind of a historical repository of the assessments that I have reviewed and applied. So let me log out of here and let me go back into TRIRIGA. Let's check that the system allocation record. So again, I need to locate that space again. It's 02BR22. If we open the record here and go to our details tab, we see that there is no more people or primary location. So we can see that the two-step process of collecting the assessment actions and applying those actions triggers an eventual update into space allocation information in TRIRIGA. Just going to circle back to a space management. I'm going to show you a couple of additional features that are available there. Give me 1 second. I was describing the situation or the scenario where Space Manager needs to have a space assessment executed at a location that's remote for the Space Manager. So in that event, what the Space Manager application allows our Space Manager to do is, again, define the assessment. I'm just going to select the same location, Charlotte Watson Center, 2nd floor. The space diagram that we were looking for. So I'm just going to define this at TTech space assigned to demo. I'm just going to give it a due date. And you will see here that I'm going to assign it to another Alfredo account that I have here, Alfredo Plan. I'm going to deselect all of them, and I'm just going to select a few for demo purposes. Now, you can see here, let's go back and select all of them, that any selectable space is fair game for the assessment. Right? I don't know if probably it's too small. Let me zoom in. If you can see here, in the diagram, you can see that there are some even restrooms highlighted. Maybe restrooms are spaces that you do not normally assess, right? Or there are other types of spaces that you do not normally assess, and you don't want to be excluding from the assessment when you go with the predefined select all spaces for the assessment. So we have implemented as well some functionality that allows you to do that, right? Basically go into space classification, look for the space classification definition of your interest, and basically exclude them to be a part of the space assessment process. Let me quickly do that, and I'll return to the assign to, just to show you that it will be now restrooms will be now spaces that are not even selectable. So I'm going to circle back to TRIRIGA. Oops, sorry. And in this case, I need to go and look for classifications. And I need to look for spaces. Just give me 1 second while it renders all the complete hierarchy here. Just bear with me, I have a little bit of latency here with my system. I'll try again. There you go. Okay, so I need to look for space here. Space class. Yes, space class, and then I'm gonna look for OCRE. Give me 1 second now, I cannot find my note here. Excuse me. All right. Okay, let me show you then. My apologies. Another note here on the classification tree. Okay, so oh, sorry, I was on the wrong note. Place class current, yep, all CSRE. My apologies, so I'm going to go now look for core building. And here we have our restroom. I'm going to select it, I'm going to open that record. And we're going to see that new attribute that we introduced to this record. Down here in the details, you can see here we have the new flag, exclude from assessment, right? So I'm just going to select it, save it and close it. So basically this is indicating that any space within the context of TRIRIGA that's associated with this particular classification element in this classification structure will not be a target for assessments, right? So let me go back to space management. And basically run that space assessment creation one more time. So we're selecting our known Charlotte Watson Center, second floor, how to approve TTEC demo, for example. And if you notice, our washrooms are highlighted in, our restrooms are highlighted in white. Deselect everyone. That implies that they are not even a selectable space element here in my diagram, right? So that's giving our space managers the freedom of identifying from their space classification structures which elements they don't even want to waste time in not even running the assessment, but just even on selecting them by when where they are benefiting from the auto select of all the spaces on the floor plan. So common areas, staircases, elevator cubes, etc. Right? Those are in certain occasions space definitions that are not normally assessed. So you can just go in through the space classification and basically enable the space assessment exclusion flag, and you won't be able to. You will not need to worry about on selecting every time because you're not interested in assessing those types of spaces. So where was I? Okay, I'm gonna select my name as the auto assigned, and I'm just gonna select this space over here, and I'm gonna select the creation. So if I log in now again with my other account, into space assessment, now I'm playing the role of the person that's a remote, and basically you will get the request of executing an assessment. You can see here I have the assessment ready for me to start working on. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to click new assessment, select a location, select the floor that I need to assess, select the spaces that I need to assess. I already have it here. So it's pretty straightforward. I can just grab my tablet device, start working the floor, select the space, and basically complete the assessment. And this is where the second step process will kick in, where space manager will log into space management application and basically decide to apply the actions identified in the during the assessment. And finally, I'm just going to show you another piece of our use case scenario. This is where the space manager fully trusts whoever is running the assessment. The space manager knows that any actions that will be collected during the assessment, he doesn't want to deal with that. It will be just something that he's not interested in. He knows that he will do any exclusions of the actions that will be taken over there. So instead of being a two-step process, the assessment execution and spaces allocations update, instead of being a two-step process, it effectively becomes a one-step process. And it's pretty straightforward. So at the moment of defining the space assessment through space management, let me select again Charlotte Watson Center, second floor, to approve TTEC test 2. Just give it a due date, and I'm gonna assign it to me again. And in this case, we select on this particular space, there is no person assigned, so we're going to assign one person. I'm going to show you that the record will be updated automatically, right? Or it will be auto-applied or auto-approved. So I'm just going to create it. So I showed you before, I can go now into space assessment, and this assessment definition will be waiting for me. Okay, here's my auto-approved TTEC test number 2. Go in. I'm going to start executing it. So I'm just going to take note of the space is 02 BQ02. So you can see here there are no people assigned, no assets assigned. So I'm just going to assign one person here. Maybe this guy, George Abelson. The assessment is complete. And in the, remember the two-step process, once I click complete, Space Manager will need to go in and verify that the actions are fine, if he doesn't need to exclude anyone, and then select apply the actions here, because it's been identified as an auto-approve. Once I complete, we'll have some workflow process kicking in immediately, and the TRIRIGA space allocation information will be updated. So this is basically saving one step and obviously the time associated with running through the review. So for assessments of maybe locations that are small in size, or that the level of changes in the space allocation is low, this is the way to go. Let me just quickly show you the record here. Yep. So let me go to portfolio, spaces, let me look for the space 02-BQ02. So Watson Center. And you can see here now that people listed as prime allocation, we have George Abelson, and before we didn't. Basically, we just demonstrated the space assessment execution on a single step. With that, I conclude my part of this TTEC session. So I will turn it over for ANCAP and Nityan, and they're going to take you guys through a technical overview of what we are providing in this release. Let me stop sharing, and you can take it over, guys.